Hi, my name is Malcolm, and our group is going to talk about mergers and acquisitions. So, mergers and acquisitions are defined as consolidation of companies. Differentiating the two terms, mergers is a combination of two companies to form one, while acquisitions is one company taken over by the other. Mergers and acquisitions is one of the major aspects of the corporate finance world. The reasoning behind mergers and acquisitions generally given is that two separate companies together create more value compared to being on an individual stand. With the objective of wealth maximization, companies keep evaluating different opportunities through the route of merger or acquisition. Mergers and acquisitions can take place by purchasing assets, purchasing common shares of a company, exchanging of shares for assets, and by exchanging shares for shares. So there are four types of mergers and acquisitions. Companies will generally merge together and acquire each other for a variety of reasons. Here are four of the main ways companies join forces. So horizontal merger acquisition is two companies come together with similar products and services. By merging, they are expanding their range, but are are not essentially doing anything new. For example, in 2002, Hewlett Packard took over Compaq Computers for $24.2 billion. The aim was to create the dominant personal computer supplier by combining the PC products of both companies. Secondly, we have vertical merger acquisition. This is when two companies join forces in the same industry, but they are at different points on the supply chain. They become more vertically integrated by improving logistics, consolidating staff, and perhaps reducing time to market for products. A clothing retailer who buys a clothing manufacturing company would be a good example of a vertical merger. And thirdly, we have conglomerate merger acquisition. This is when two companies in different industries join forces or one takes over the other in order to broaden their range of services and products. This approach can help reduce costs by combining back office activities as well as reduce risk by operating in a range of industries. And lastly, we have concentric merger acquisition. In some cases, two companies will share customers but provide different services. An example would be Sony, who manufacture DVD players, but who also bought the Columbia Pictures movie studio in 1989. Sony were now available to produce films to be able to be played on their DVD players. Indeed, this was a key part of the strategy to introduce Sony Blu-ray DVD players. Reasons for mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions take place for many strategic business reasons, but the most common reasons for any business combination are economic at their core. Following are some of the various economic reasons. First, we have increasing capabilities. Increased capabilities may come from expanded research and development opportunities or more robust manufacturing operations, or any range of core competencies a company wants to increase. Similarly, companies may want to combine to leverage costly manufacturing operations. Capability may not just be a particular department, the capability may come from acquiring a unique technology platform rather than trying to build it. Biopharmaceutical companies are a hotbed for mergers and acquisition activities due to the extreme investment necessary for successful research and development in the market. In 2011 alone, the four biggest mergers or acquisitions in the biopharmaceutical industry were valued at over 75 billion US dollars. Secondly, we have gaining a competitive advantage or larger market share. Companies may decide to merge into order to gain a better distribution or marketing network. A company may want to expand into different markets where a similar company is already operating rather than starting from ground zero. And so the company may just merge with the other company. The distribution or marketing network gives both companies a wider customer base practically overnight. Diversifying products or services. Another reason for merging companies is to complement a current product or service. Two firms may be able to combine their products or services to gain a competitive edge over others in the marketplace. For example, in 2008, HP bought EDS to strengthen the services side of their technology offerings. This deal was valued at about 13.9 billion US dollars. Replacing leadership. In a private company, the company may need to merge or be acquired if the current owners can't identify someone within the company to succeed them. The owners may also wish to cash out to invest their money in something else, such as retirement. Cutting costs. When two companies have similar products or services, combining can create a large opportunity to reduce costs. When companies merge, frequently they have an opportunity to combine locations or reduce operating costs by integrating and streamlining support functions. This economic strategy has to do with economies of scale, when the total cost of production of services or products is lowered as the volume increases. The company therefore maximizes total profits. And lastly, we have surviving. It's never easy for a company to willingly give up its identity to another company, but sometimes it is the only option in order for the company to survive. A number of companies used mergers and acquisitions to grow and survive during the global financial crisis from 2008 to 2012. During the financial crisis, many banks merged in order to deleverage failing balance sheets that otherwise may have put them out of business. Mergers and acquisitions occur for other reasons too, but these are some of the most common ones. Frequently, companies have multiple reasons for combining. That was my presentation, and to the next presenter, please.
Hi, I am Blair, and I am here to talk a little bit about the history of mergers and acquisitions, as well as touch on some of the biggest successes and failures. Mergers and acquisitions first appeared in the late 1800s and is ever present in today's business world. Over the last 100 plus years, there have been about 6 waves of mergers and acquisitions that all happened for different reasons. The first wave began in 1893 and was characterized by horizontal mergers, which are mergers between rivals or competitors within the same industry. This was beneficial to companies that wanted to establish monopolies to dominate their industry, and particularly happened within the manufacturing sector. The second wave started shortly after the First World War in 1919 and is known for the creation of oligopolies. Some of the monopolies that were present during the first wave were now deemed illegal, which led to companies switching to vertical mergers. These mergers involved two companies that were collaborators rather than rivals, such as a manufacturing company buying a company that produces the raw materials. This wave, unfortunately, was cut short in 1929 due to the Great Depression. The third wave did not begin until 1955, when diversification and conglomerates came to the forefront. The mergers and acquisitions during this wave often involved companies that were not in the same field or were not related to each other. The reason for this was companies wanted to increase their revenue streams by entering into new markets. One of the biggest names that emerged from this wave was the General Electric Company. The fourth wave was a very short wave that took place between 1984 and 1989. The fourth wave was best known for the arrival of corporate raiders and hostile takeovers. The problem with this wave is that the investment banks during this time were giving out too large of sums of cash to the companies that wanted to perform these hostile takeovers. And so inevitably, banks lent out too much cash and were unable to maintain their capital structure, leading to the end of the fourth wave. The fifth wave featured mega deals and cross-border mergers. The belief then was that the bigger the company, the more dominant they will be in the market. A couple of the well-known companies that came from this wave are ExxonMobil and Daimler and Chrysler. The sixth and most recent merger and acquisition wave took place in a very short period before the 2008 financial crisis. Shareholders became more active during this wave and also had more say and influence on the companies they were involved with. Leveraged buyouts also became prevalent during this wave as companies were able to cover their costs of acquiring a new company. However, unlike the fourth wave, the interest rates were kept low, and therefore there was less risk for the banks giving out these loans. Well, there was plenty of successful mergers and acquisitions over time, but I'm just going to talk about some of the most successful. So, in 2006, Disney purchased Pixar for about $7.4 billion. This deal has largely been successful due to the continuity between the two organizations. Disney was able to access Pixar's advanced technologies while also keeping Pixar's culture in place. And now Pixar is able to put out at least 2 movies every year, which was something that was not possible before the merger. Another very successful merger, and is often known as one of the most successful, is the Exxon and Mobil merger. This Mobil cost a whopping $80 billion, and it occurred in 1999. ExxonMobil quickly became a powerhouse in the oil industry and is still considered a very strong leader today. It is also worth noting investors in this company have since quadrupled their money as the shares have gone up a massive 293%. Another very successful merger, but also a very hostile one, was between Pfizer and Warner Lambert in the year 2000. Warner Lambert was originally supposed to be purchased by American Home Products, but Pfizer stepped in, paying over 40% more than what American Home Products was offering. The reason for this merger, and also why it was so successful, is because Pfizer was able to acquire the ownership of the top-selling cholesterol medication known as Lipster. In 2006, AT&T was able to acquire BellSouth for about $86 billion. This acquisition helped AT&T become one of the major players in the mobile industry, and they were able to expand their coverages into rural areas of the US, but they were also able to offer bundles that included TV, internet, and mobile. Unfortunately, not all mergers and acquisitions go according to plan. 2 of the biggest mergers and acquisitions in history also just happened to be 2 of the biggest failures. One of these was between American Online, or also known as AOL, when they acquired Time Warner in 2000 for just a cool $165 billion. This was the second largest acquisition in history at the time, but this merger was also short-lived. With the internet bubble bursting and dial-up internet access declining, disaster struck for these companies. There was also some conflicts in management style and with their culture, which eventually led to the breakup of the 2 companies in 2009. Now, the biggest merger in history is also one of the biggest failures. In 2000, Vodafone and Mannesmann agreed to a deal worth $180 billion. With this deal, Vodafone became the largest mobile operator in the world. It is deemed unsuccessful because just a few years later, Vodafone actually had to write off billions of dollars and is unfortunately worth less than they were before when the deal took place. Back in 1968, New York Central and Pennsylvania Railroad companies merged together to form the joint company Penn Central. At the time, it was the 6th largest corporation, but unfortunately just 2 years later, the company went bankrupt, making it the largest corporate bankruptcy at the time as well. Another failed merger happened between Quaker Oats and Snapple in 1994. When Quaker Oats acquired Snapple, they changed the way Snapple was marketed by trying to compete in the large supermarket retailers. The problem with this was that most of Snapple's sales came from small outlets such as gas stations or local convenience stores. Another issue was that Coca-Cola and PepsiCo introduced similar products that ate away at Snapple's market share. Just 2 years later, Snapple was sold by Quaker Oats for a measly $300 million, which made it a $1.4 billion loss. Finally, another big flop was the merger of Sprint and Nextel Communications. Cultural differences between the two companies led to numerous Nextel managers and high-level staff to leave the company. The economy also took a turn for the worse shortly after the merger took place, which also led to the stock prices plummeting. Then eventually, Sprint had to lay off many employees and even wrote off $30 billion in one-time charges, clearly making this merger an utter failure. It is also worth noting that just this past year, Sprint merged with the mobile giant known as T-Mobile.
Hello, my name is Benost. On this topic of mergers and acquisitions, I'll be speaking about the process of acquiring another company. The process of acquiring another company is usually long. It goes through different stages, and usually there are three transaction types. There's a private, auction, and listed target. The private is the shortest, and the auction is the longest. Through the process, there are many stages, and the first one is a teaser. A teaser is a brief summary of the company with short description of its business. Often does not include the company's name. The next stage is confidentiality agreement. This is an agreement not to distribute reserved information. The target needs to be assured that the access it gives to bidders would not lead to a leakage of strategic information. When this happens, the parties involved face legal charges. After this confidentiality agreement has been signed, that's when the company is willing to merge or acquire this company, go into the books and see what this company does and if it's a business worthy acquiring. The next stage in the process is information memorandum. Information memo is a document providing description of the target business, financials, management team, product portfolio, marketing positioning, you name it. Usually, after getting this memo, the companies look at everything they do, who is involved, and what is involved. Once that has been done, then they see if they can go ahead or if they can stop. Coming to the next stage, it is the process letter. The process letter defines the essential elements of the transaction. This include timing, valuation range, other conditions, due diligence, and many more. Usually in this process letter, they tell them exactly things which are to be processed. If it's valuation range, how many things or how far they are able to go with the valuation. If it's the due diligence, how far, how deep they are to go into their books. That's what happens in this process. Now, after the process letter, the companies know how deep they can go. The next one is due diligence. The target firm provides access. It could be a limited access or a full access. It depends on how they agree upon this. They provide access to it to the financials, tax, and legal documentations. Often, information about target is provided in a data room. With a due diligence, what happens is that they make sure they understand what is happening and they know what they are getting themselves involved in. The next process stage is binding offers. This one typically works in auction because we have so many people, so many companies coming, and they are all willing to acquire this company or to merge with it. So what happens at the auction? Let's say they are raising prices. I believe most of you have been on at the auction or have heard about it. What happens is once people have said we are going to offer this amount of money to acquire or merge with this company, that's the money they pay. You can't change after the auction. The next one is shortlist. After receiving indications about possible valuation, the target and its advisors decide with participants which participants will be left in auction or will be receiving the due diligence. So that's where they choose which people to go with. The next one is negotiation. Negotiation is where they agree upon uh, various elements such as the structure of the price, earnout mechanism, price adjustments. And with these negotiations, this is where they talk about how much they are going to pay, whether they are paying with cash or whether they can pay with stocks, or if they can pay with the combination of stocks as well as cash. But most buyers prefer cash. Actually, all buyers prefer cash. And the last piece is tender offer. A tender offer is submitted to a listed firm. It is a tender offer. It's public and openly addressed to all stockholders, and the offers they're being paid for their shares. And once that is done, that's how the company is bought and or is acquired or merge happens. The end. Thank you.
My name is Aaron Vanderplug, and I will be going over some valuation techniques used to determine business value when creating merger models. I will also be running through some simplified examples to see how they are calculated. In the merger and acquisition process, business valuations are required to determine the price of the purchased business. It will be in the seller's best interest to value their company at the highest possible value, while the buyer will value it at the lowest possible value. To get an objective business value, there are different valuation metrics used to determine a fair business value. Today I'll be taking a look at the comparable company analysis, discounted cash flow, calculating WACC, and finally using the information to calculate the terminal value. With comparable company analysis, we look at different financial ratios of similar publicly traded companies to determine the business value. One of the most difficult steps of this method comes from finding the right companies to compare. The main criteria to look for when selecting companies to compare is industry, size, growth rates, and profitability. Depending on the size and the nature of the company, it can be difficult to find similar publicly traded companies. The ratios used depend largely on which company you're evaluating, but here are some very commonly used ratios. The price to earnings ratio, the enterprise value to revenue ratio, and the enterprise value to EBITDA ratio. The price to earnings ratio helps determine whether a company is overvalued relative to its competitors, and the enterprise value ratios determine whether companies are earning efficiently relative to their revenue and cost of sales. So here's an example of three companies and the comparative ratio is calculated from their market data and financial statements. As we can see, these ratios are useful to compare how efficiently companies operate compared to each other. We also now have the ability to calculate the mean or any other statistical measures to determine what is expected of the industry. Next, we have the discounted cash flow model. This model is used to forecast a company's unlevered free cash flow discounted to present value. What we're looking to calculate here is the value of a business or investment based on projected future cash flows. This model can tell us a lot about the business, however it does rely on many assumptions. Throughout the calculation, you are assuming future growth rates, discount rates, and overall stable conditions, however, it's fairly unlikely. So to start our DCF analysis, we need to project financial statements, usually based on historical income statement data. This example is very simplified and removes a lot of factors, but illustrates the overall process. Given our historical income statement data, we are assuming a 10% revenue growth rate, 35% EBITDA margin, and a 30% EBIT margin, and for depreciation to remain stable at 4.8% of revenue. I've also left out the EBIT calculation for simplicity's sake. To continue our evaluation, we need to determine the weighted average cost of capital to discount our cash flows. Weighted average cost of capital is a firm's cost of capital proportionally weighted between debt and equity. For the purposes of discounted cash flow evaluations, WACC is the discount rate used to calculate net present value of the future cash flows. A higher weighted average cost of capital will result in a lower net present value of a company when calculating DCF. It is also important to note that for smaller companies, it may be necessary to add a premium to WACC to account for additional risk that would not be present in the calculation. Coming back to the example, we have a share price of $35, 400 shares outstanding, a tax rate of 35%, and other figures needed to calculate the weighted average cost of capital. I calculated total equity by multiplying the share price with the number of shares. To get the weighting, I calculated the total debt and equity by the sum of the total capital. Then to calculate the weighted average cost of capital, I take the sum of the cost of equity and debt rates multiplied by their weightings. Now that we have projected the income statement, we are able to calculate the unlevered free cash flows. Unlevered free cash flows are cash flows available to both debt and equity holders after operating and capital expenses. We need to first calculate the free cash flows before we can determine the terminal value of our discounted cash flows analysis. The unlevered free cash flows equals EBIT minus taxes plus depreciation minus capital expenditures. So to start, we take the projected EBIT and reduce it by 1 minus the tax rate. Then we add back any depreciation and subtract capital expenditures. In this example, I have given the capital expenditures amounts just for simplicity's sake. Now that we have our unlevered free cash flows, we can use the WACC rate calculated previously to discount the cash flows to determine the net present value. Finally, we calculate the sum of the present value of the free cash flows. Finally, now we can calculate the terminal value of the business. The terminal value is the present value of all future cash flows assuming a stable growth rate. It essentially tells us the value of the business. It can be calculated by multiplying the free cash flows by a growth rate and then dividing by weighted average cost of capital minus the growth rate. For this example, I chose a growth rate of 4% and determined that the present value of the company is just under $22,000. Now as a final step, to calculate the equity value per share, I subtracted the net debt from the enterprise and equity value and multiplied it by the number of shares to get a value of $54.77. This is much higher than the share price of $35. So if this were an accurate model, Company A would be highly undervalued.
Hello class, my name is Ali Marasa and I'll be presenting on synergy. So synergy can be thrown around a lot. It's arguably the most used word in M&A, and it's basically the idea that by combining business activities, performance will increase and costs will decrease. Essentially, a business attempts to merge with another business that has complementary strengths and weaknesses. So here we can see company A plus company B is less than company AB, or in other words, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. So M&A math here would be company A, give it a value of 2, plus company B, a value of 2, is less than the combined company AB given a value of 5. So the key to the existence of synergy is that the target firm controls a specialized resource that becomes more valuable when combined with the bidding firm's resources. The specialized resources will vary depending upon the merger. In a horizontal merger, you have economies of scale, which reduce cost, or from increased market power, which increase profit margins in sales. For example, Bank of America and Security Pacific, Chase and Chemical. In vertical integration, your primary source of synergy comes from controlling the chain of production much more completely. In functional integration, a firm and its strength in one functional area acquires another firm with strengths in a different functional area, and the potential synergy gains arise from exploiting these strengths in these areas. So the key to synergy is that it is created only by the combination of the firms. Each firm standing alone would not be able to produce it. Valuing operating synergy. What form is the synergy expected to take? Will it reduce costs as a percentage of sales and increase profit margins, as is the case with economies of scale? Will it increase future growth, as is the case when we have increased market power? When can the synergy be reasonably expected to start affecting cash flows? Will the gain from synergy show up instantaneously after the takeover? If it takes time, when can the gains be expected to start showing up? If synergy takes time to form, it will be worth less. In simple terms, you'll have to discount it back. Procedure for valuing synergy. The firms involved in the merger are valued independently by discounting expected cash flows to each firm at the weighted average cost of capital for the firm. The value of the combined firm with no synergy is obtained by adding the values obtained for each firm in the first set. The effect of synergy are built into expected growth rates and cash flows, and the combined firm is revalued with synergy. The value of synergy is equal to the value of the combined firm with synergy minus the value of the combined firm without synergy. You have to do 3 valuations to value synergy, and you have to quantify the impact of synergy into valuation inputs. Synergy effects and valuation inputs. So if your synergy is derived from economies of scale, then your operating margin of the combined firm will be greater than the revenue-weighted operating margin of individual firms. If synergy is derived from growth synergy, then you'll have more projects with higher reinvestment rates. You'll have better projects with higher return on capital. You'll have longer growth periods. And again, these inputs will be estimated for the combined firm. Financial synergy. Financial synergies are generally much more focused than operating synergies and hence easier to value. Diversification is when you acquire another firm as a way of reducing risk, cannot create wealth for 2 publicly traded firms with diversified stockholders, but it could create wealth for private firms or closely held publicly traded firms. Cash slack is when a firm with significant excess cash acquires another firm with great projects but not enough capital, then the combined firm has the ability to create value. Tax benefits. The tax paid by 2 firms combined together may be lower than the taxes paid by them as individual firms. There could be 2 sources. The first is one of the firms has a tax deduction that cannot be used because it's losing money, while the other firm has income on which it pays significant taxes. And then you combine the firms, the 2 firms can lead to tax benefits that can be shared by the 2 firms. The value of the synergy is the present value of the tax savings that accrue because of this merger. Another source is the assets of the firms being taken over can be written up to reflect new market value in some forms of mergers, leading to higher tax savings from depreciation in future years. Lastly, debt capacity. By combining 2 firms, each of which have little or no debt capacity, it is possible to create a firm that may have the capacity to borrow money and create value. Why is it so difficult to get synergy? Synergy is often used as a plug variable in acquisitions. It is the difference between the price paid and the estimated value. Even when synergy is valued, the valuations are incomplete and cursory. Some common manifestations include valuing just the target company for synergy. You have to value the combined firm, not thinking about the cost of delivering synergy and the timing of gains, underestimating the difficulty of getting two organizations with different cultures to work together, failure to plan for synergy. Synergy does not show up by accident, failure to hold anyone responsible for delivering the synergy. If an acquisition is motivated by synergy, you have to make realistic estimates of the value of the synergy by taking into account the difficulties associated with combining the two organizations and other costs. You cannot pay this value as a premium on the acquisition. Your objective is to pay less and share in the gains. If you get into a bidding war, most of the time it makes most sense to just drop out. You have to have a detailed plan for how the synergy will actually be created, and you have to hold someone responsible for it. You have to follow up to ensure that you actually get the promised gains that are delivered. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this part of the presentation.
So now we're going to talk about some mergers that may happen in the future. First, we'll start with Amazon.com and AMC Entertainment. Shares of AMC Entertainment have been skyrocketing lately because of the rumors of a merger between themselves and Amazon being sparked. AMC is an American movie theater chain and the largest movie theater chain in the world. Founded in 1920, AMC is the largest share of the U.S. theater market. This, combined with Amazon.com, Amazon is now the world's most valuable brand, according to ranking of global companies. The company is worth $315.5 billion, according to BrandZ's top 100 most valuable global rankings for 2019. Last year alone, it was ranked in third place after Apple and Google. With these two huge, highly traded companies merging together, the likeliness of success is very high. This has investors very interested in what the future of these two companies holds. As everyone knows, Amazon already has its own streaming service, so breaking into the movie theater market could be huge for themselves and the competition in future. Next, we have Uber Technologies and Grubhub. Food delivery was always a war of attrition, as the expenses of delivery service often outweighed any profit seen by Uber or Grubhub. Both with Uber's ride-hailing business decimated by the pandemic, Uber Eats was a lone bright spot for the company, which they wanted to expand on. The acquisition of Grubhub would boost Uber's food service delivery, Uber Eats, above its competition of DoorDash, and move itself closer to monopoly of the food service industry in America. Although this merger looked promising, things didn't quite pan out. Uber and Grubhub combined would account for more than half of the US food delivery market, according to some analysis estimates. The deal would almost certainly draw scrutiny from antitrust officials and politicians wary of big mergers that would lead to job cuts. As the economy reels from the COVID-19 pandemic fallout, Uber Technologies Inc. CEO has spent much of his career deftly negotiating acquisitions. Yet his $6.5 billion all-stock bid for Grubhub Inc. ended with the food delivery company being acquired by European rival Just Eat Takeaway.com. Next is Apple and Netflix. Currently, there's a 40% chance that Apple will acquire Netflix.com. This would allow Apple to gain access to original content with proven appeal, enabling it to be better compete in a video streaming landscape that's becoming increasingly crowded. It would give Apple a huge pool of subscribers. With these subscribers, they could attempt to sway onto purchasing their products in future. However, some Netflix content could be at odds with Apple's approach to online video. Though Netflix has a catalog of successful original series, not all of its programs are suitable for all age groups. This would be a problem for Apple, which aims to acquire comedies and emotional dramas with broad appeal, instead of shows containing nudity and raw language. According to Bloomberg, Apple may find a harder time justifying purchasing Netflix because the video streaming service catalog of content isn't fully in line with its long-term strategy. Could 2021 be the year of mergers? 2021 may be the year of mergers. Like most business activities, mergers and acquisitions took a hit during the height of COVID-19 pandemic. Uncertainty about future growth prospects made a lot of companies hesitant to make deals. So, a lot of great, profitable US businesses that might have looked into mergers and acquisitions are now sitting on plenty of cash. Now's the perfect time to do it. Pandemic-fueled market volatility has made prices for deals attractive. And with interest rates at historic lows, any borrowing needed for fund deals is cheaper than ever. So 2021 may see a lot of mergers and acquisitions.